Good morning to all. In the name of God, the most beneficent and merciful, I begin the proceedings of the webinar titled Celebration of Wildlife Week 2023. I invite Dr. Nazneen Zehra, Assistant Professor, Department of Wildlife Sciences, to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you very much, Sana. Good morning, everyone. Respected Professor P.K.Malik, sir, Professor Gopi G.V. sir, Dean, Faculty of Life Sciences, AMU, Chairman, Department of Wildlife Sciences, AMU, my colleagues, and all the esteemed participants of today's webinar, a very good morning, adab, namaskar, sat sri akal to you all. It is indeed a privilege and an honor for me to extend a very warm welcome to you all on the occasion of Wildlife Week Celebration 2023. India celebrated Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav last year and 76 years of its freedom this year. This is quite a lot to celebrate as far as wildlife and biodiversity conservation is concerned. Our country has achieved some milestones in wildlife conservation during 76 years of its freedom. The enactment of Wildlife Protection Act 1972, launching of Project Tiger, and successful conservation of tiger in India through establishment of more than 50 exclusive tiger reserves and establishment of a very fine and representative protected areas across length and width of a country are some of the milestones to name here. This has been achieved despite our country having challenges of poverty and need for rapid economic development for raising living standards of masses. The celebration of 75 years of freedom, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, coincided with another big milestone in the area of conservation. Under the able leadership, guidance, and patronage of our beloved Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, India successfully reintroduced cheetah in India in Kuno National Park. This is a fine example of our country's as well as its leadership commitment towards the wildlife conservation. I must mention here that today's lead speaker, respected Shri Professor P.K.Malik ji, is involved in cheetah reintroduction program as expert, and it a matter of honor for all of us. I once again extend a warm welcome to all the participants in today's webinar. I sincerely hope that today's celebrations will be very enriching for all of us and will lead to advancement of knowledge. I wish all the participants happy learning. Thank you very much and good luck to all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nazneen Zehra, for delivering the welcome address. I now invite Mr. Arun to apprise the august gathering of learned participants about the importance of Wildlife Week in India.
Good morning, everyone. We all gather here to celebrate the 69th Wildlife Week through this webinar. We celebrate National Wildlife Week annually across India from 2nd to 8th of October, which coincides with the birth anniversary of the father of the nation, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. This notable milestone is also associated with the opening of Tachikam National Park to the public during the 98th UN celebration. The theme of this 69th Wildlife Week is Partnership for Wildlife Conservation. reflects the collaborative efforts required to protect and preserve the nation's rich biodiversity. We actively celebrate this week to raise awareness about the importance of wildlife and spark concern in the people for its conservation. Although the Wildlife Week celebration was conceptualized in 1952 by the Indian Board of Wildlife with the aim of long-term wildlife nature and natural resource conservation by raising awareness among the people. Originally, it is observed as a Wildlife Day in 1955. It evolved into a week-long celebration in 1957 to highlight the long-term importance and efforts of safeguarding the country's precious wildlife. Today, we feel proud to observe India as a biological hotspot, or it is home to a large variety of animal and plant species, which is account for 7 to 8% of the world's fauna. We also feel effortless that India's wildlife is facing severe threats from habitat destruction, pollution, climate change, invasive species, and disease. This highly biological diversified country needs proper awareness, especially in youth and children's education, to preserve the rich biodiversity of our country. As a responsible citizen of this country, it's our duty to make people aware about the importance of wildlife conservation and protection. That's why every year Wildlife Week is celebrated to remind us of our responsibilities and duties for nature and natural resources, to make people more aware of the protection of the wildlife, to draw people's attention toward the conservation of wildlife, to plant more trees, to go green India, to implement all possible steps to preserve wildlife, and to discuss all the issues related to the conservation of wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arun, for your informative talk on the celebration of Wildlife Week in India. I would now like to invite Mr. Nabil to introduce our first speaker of today, Venerable Dr. P.K.Malik, who is a leading wildlife authority in India. P.K.Malik is currently member National Tiger Conservation Authority and member Cheetah Task Force. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sana. Good morning, everyone. Dr. Pradeep Malik is Senior Professor Emeritus, Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun. Dr. Malik joined the Wildlife Institute of India in 1988 and shared the major responsibility towards a multidisciplinary approach to address interface health issues between wildlife, livestock, and humans through development of countrywide wildlife health program in select veterinary institutions. Dr. Malik has over 33 years of experience in building enhanced wildlife health capacity in India amongst the next generation of wildlife health professionals, as well as the frontline staff of protected areas. He continues to develop effective wildlife health monitoring and disease surveillance programs, as well as constantly improvising and standardizing state-of-the-art wildlife immobilization and restraint techniques that are suitable for South Asian context. Dr. Malik has many decades of experience in supporting the protected area managers in tackling human-wildlife conflict with a particular focus on large carnivores. Dr. Malik has developed series of modules on wildlife health management for biologists, veterinarians, wildlife managers, and frontline staff of protected areas. These modules are now part of WII's regular and short-term courses. During the last 33 years at WII, Dr. Malik provided technical expertise to over 30 projects of the Institute, including a long-term study on ecology of tigers in Panna National Park, and more recently, reintroduction of tigers in Sariska Tiger Reserve. He's been instrumental in the inception and delivering the very successful Wildlife Health Bridge course jointly developed by the Wildlife Institute of India, Zoological Society of London, and the University of Edinburgh. The international training equips the wildlife health professionals with a variety of tools and techniques to address the wildlife health management and increase capacity to contribute towards mitigating human-wildlife conflict. Dr. Malik's major interests include promoting One Health at the human-wildlife interface, health management of wild and domestic animals, mitigation of the interface conflicts, human resource development, radio telemetry, and immobilization of wild animals, and development of collaborative international programs. He is a member of International Wildlife Disease Association and coordinator South Asia, IUCN Vulture Special Group Species Survival Commission, in association with Dr. F. George Dean, developed a countrywide wildlife health program, Indian Wildlife Health Cooperative, in 5 veterinary institutes in India, located in 5 regions of India: Assam, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, and Haryana. Dr. Malik ably steered a collaborative initiative with the Zoological Society of London and Gujarat Forest Department to support Gir lion conservation in Gujarat and implementing SMART, that is spatial monitoring and reporting tool, to establish effective patrolling systems, monitor wildlife populations and movements, and identify threats such as poaching or diseases. Development of educational activities, training of veterinary staff in the wildlife health, and best practices in animal care and breeding were effectively achieved for ex situ conservation of Asiatic lions. More recently, Dr. Malik piloted WII's ZSL Transboundary Tiger Recovery Project between India and Nepal, funded by IUCN Integrated Tiger Habitat Conservation Program. Major outcome included attaining increasing tiger populations through improved management and monitoring in Nadhaur-Tirai arc landscape and transboundary tiger site in India, with focus on law enforcement, biological monitoring, and sustainable development for local communities in Nadhaur-Tirai arc landscape. Dr. Malik has been the recipient of Carl Zeiss Award in 2002 for his outstanding contributions to the field of wildlife health in India and his passionate contributions and commitment to the conservation of wild tigers, wildlife, and wilderness areas across the region. Received recognition as Centers for Disease Control and Prevention International Conference on Emerging Infectious Diseases, Leaders Program for Enhancing Prevention of Infectious Diseases Globally, conferred by the United States Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nabil, for introducing Dr. P.K. Malik to the august gathering of our learned participants. I now invite Professor P.K. Malik to deliver a keynote address titled Human-Wildlife Interface, Biodiversity Loss and Climate Change, Relationship with Disease Emergence. Over to Professor P.K. Malik.
Thank you very much and good morning to everyone. Are you able to hear me well?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So that was a very long introduction.
Yes, sir.
All right. So I have changed the topic a little bit, but contents will be the same, considering that very large number of people are talking One Health approach these days. So yesterday night, I did some changes in my presentation. I think that will be more interesting for you. So, but I'll cover all the issues related to biodiversity loss and its connection with the emerging diseases.
Sir, it would be better.
So let me tell you how it all happened, how I developed the interest in these connections that related to the biodiversity and emergence of many important pathogens. So it was in 1997. I met Professor Eric Shivian, a Nobel laureate from the Harvard in the United States. And we were staying at the same place, in same cottage for 3 days to discuss a new discipline of conservation medicine. And 28 people were invited from different parts of the world. So I had very important conversation with Dr. Eric Shivian at the time during my stay there and attending that conference. And this was the time I started developing interest in how a lot of biodiversity issues are connected to the emergence of pathogens. And in this talk, we will relate some of these very important issues. I would recommend that you should buy this book, Sustaining Life, How Humans' Health Depends upon Biodiversity. But the executive summary is available free of cost. You can check on the internet. You will get 30-40 pages of executive summary. This will be a very, very important document for you and probably change your thinking in terms of the newer health issues which are emerging on daily basis. I also, at the same time, very, read great variety of literature in terms of the value of biodiversity, which we never calculate. This is a paper which was published in 1997 in Nature. But I also read, you should see this paper. I have given the reference of this paper. This will make your understanding very clear, and I hope that many of you must have read this paper. This is very important. At the same time, I also read a lot of connecting papers related to the value of the biodiversity, and I started connecting those dots with certain emerging health issues, not only in India, but around the globe. So considering that today's presentation and making it a little bit more understandable to all of you, let's do the situation analysis taking a couple of examples. One of the very important example is a arboviral disease known as Casanur forest disease, which is restricted to only India. Casanur forest disease is a very important viral disease. This is found in Karnataka. It is started about 60 years ago in a very small patch of Shimoga district. But over the period of time, this disease have now occupied 4 states. This is a very lethal arboviral disease. When I say arboviral, hemorrhagic disease, these are the very similar type of diseases, like the symptoms and the condition of the patient which you see in cases like dengue, Zika virus, and chikungunya. They are all related viruses. So if you see, how all these things are connected with the, biodiversity. What is happening, and I attended a meeting of WHO a couple of years ago in Bangalore on KFD, organized by WHO, India office, participants from WHO International Office, and National Center for Disease Control in India, and Ministry of Health and Family Welfare in India, and other persons from Department of Animal and Welfare, government. The most of the time discussion was centered around the symptoms of the disease, the diagnosis, and the treatment. And this was my very important questions to all the organizers and participants, that if we keep on discussing for last 60 years, and more recently now, only the symptoms and diagnosis and treatment, how you are going to control the expansion of this disease. From a small area of 50 square kilometers, now the disease in 4 states. The reason is that we are not looking at the vector biology. We are not looking at how this disease is coming from a forested area to human beings, how this disease is able to maintain itself in its reservoir host. So these are some of the very, very important aspects. Unless we study these important aspects, it is very, very difficult to control some of the very, very lethal human health issues which are emerging. Take another example of influenza. Most of you are considering that things are over with Corona 2. It's not. You have a very serious and more serious virus than coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 virus, influenza viruses. These are not normal influenza viruses like what you see in cold, cough and cold. These are, I'm talking of influenza A viruses, which are found naturally in migratory birds and more typically in migratory ducks. So when I say migratory ducks, it means that you will not have the presence of this virus normally in a crane. But if you see a lot of migratory ducks, you will have this virus present normally in their intestinal. So how this is coming into humans? The reason is that we are having the poultry farms, organized poultry and backyard poultry much closer to the migratory bird habitat. The domestic poultry is coming into the contact of migratory bird habitat, and there they are picking the infection. in a very rare circumstances, this virus can become very pathogenic to the domestic poultry, including the backyard poultry. And then sometimes the virus mutates and can come into the human system. And once it starts causing disease in human system, then it is known as human influenza viruses. All other things that it was an avian influenza or maybe came from poultry, all things are gone. This is a new human influenza virus. And if you see what the influenza virus doesn't have caused, if you check on the internet, 1918, Spanish flu. Spanish flu was the same influenza A viruses which came from wild birds to the human environment. As far as the known history, human history is concerned, it is not World War I, World War II, and many migrations. It is the influenza A viruses in 1918 Spanish flu, which has culminated into the largest human mortality ever known to humans in the known and written human history. Around 100 million people died at the time. Why this is very risky now, and we have to be very serious, because a lot of influenza A viruses are circulating in a very large environment over different continents. So once a virus or pathogen is circulating in a very large environment, then there are more chances of mutation. That's what the worry is. And if tomorrow, if something develops like a new human influenza viruses, that will be a very difficult situation for all of us. I'm not saying that we will get into this situation, because a lot of countries are working to not this condition to happen, including India. India is giving a very important attention to these type of pathogens, and there is a lot of cooperation between the various departments like human health and animal health to combat and to prevent such events in the future. Okay, so I was telling that, I will cover very quickly some of these slides, that in 1997, I also came across some of the publications, including this one, which was published in Nature, about the value of the biodiversity. And this is how I start connecting these dots, that what is the relationship of the biodiversity with emerging pathogens, because that was the time, around 90s, a lot of new pathogens started emerging. So I will discuss this approach, taking a few examples of doing situation analysis. And one of the situation analysis we did recent right now was Cassonal forest disease. It is an arboviral disease limited only to the India. And this disease was, earlier, first time it was noticed around 1960s in a very small area in Shimoga district in Karnataka. But over the period of time, because as I was telling, we are discussing only the symptoms of the disease, diagnosis of the disease and treatment, but we are not looking at the reservoir host and its vector. That is why this disease has been able to expand its geographical region to 4 states in India around Karnataka. And this is a very, very bad disease. It is sometimes very difficult to even treat. After that, I was discussing about influenza viruses, that influenza A viruses are very different viruses. They are not cough and cold viruses. Influenza A viruses are normally found in the intestinal tract of the migratory birds. And the migratory birds only largely migratory ducks, not in other species like cormorant or cranes. And how these influenza viruses are very important. I told that the largest human mortality has happened because of the influenza A viruses, which mutated from the birds, came to the poultry, and then came to human beings. And about 100 million people died in 1918 or 1990. A very similar situation like what happened very recently 3 years ago in COVID, SARS coronavirus 2. So let's discuss another very important issue, which is also related to the biodiversity and the changes which are happening in the environment, global amphibian loss. This is a very, very important thing. 2 days ago, there was a publication. It is a very comprehensive publication published in Nature, ongoing decline of amphibians around the world. I have given reference. This is published on 4th October 23 in Nature, 2023. Please read this paper very carefully. This is written by about 50 authors around the world, and you will understand that what are the various important factors related to the biodiversity and other important issues like climate change and weather conditions and the pollution in the environment, because amphibians is the one very important species which directly remains in the contact of the soil and water. They are the best, they can provide the best assessment of the health of the environment. And amphibians are also important, not only in terms of ecosystem function, but also, providing food to humans. There is a, if you see recent statistics I was looking at, in Europe, 15 million kg per year amphibians are harvested as a human food. In the United States, more than 3 million kg per year amphibians are harvested for human food. But at the same time, they are also very, very important for pharmaceutical industry. There are many, many important secretions from the amphibians which are providing very important and very crucial pharmaceutical agents for the pharmaceutical industry for the treatment of variety of diseases in human beings. So these are some of the very, very other important publications, but I would request that if you read this most recent publication, which published 2 days ago, it is an eye-opener for you that what is happening to amphibian loss around the world. And primarily, there is one very important fungal disease which is very important, Ichthyomycosis, the important disease which is causing about 70% loss, and it has 100% mortality, causing 70% loss of the certain species of the amphibian population around the globe. Now, another important thing related to the biodiversity loss and connection to the disease is the wildlife markets. There are a couple of very important wildlife markets in places where the international agencies do not have much control. You know what I'm talking about. And if you see the number of there can be very large number of microbes in our system. But as far as we know, there are only 1,709 microbes, bacteria, and viruses and related organisms like spirochetes and fungal diseases. There are about 1,709 pathogens which are important for causing disease. Out of these 1,709, there are at least half of them are zoonotic in nature. Means they can come from animals to human beings and human beings to animals, vice versa. Out of these, there are about 56 diseases are emerging. 80% of some of the zoonotic diseases can be used as a bioterrorism agent. For example, anthrax. Anthrax is a bacterial disease which has a very large host range, including humans. It's a very important zoonotic disease. Anthrax spore. I'm giving only one example, but you should read, because there is a lot of very good literature available on the internet from some of the very authentic government sites like Center for Disease Control in the United States, National Center for Disease Control in India, which was earlier known as National Institute of Communicable Diseases. It belongs to the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare in Government of India. You should read these sites, and a lot of very good information is available on these sites. Now, take example of anthrax. Anthrax spores will remain alive even in soil, tolerating all that heat and ultraviolet rays for 60 years. So you can have spores in a neurola, and you can use these spores as a bioterrorism microbe. So these are some of this is one example, but there are some fungal disease also. So these are some of the very, very important microbes which can be used as a bioterrorism agent. Now, this is a new thing. I know about this pathogen for last 30 years because initially, this is a very old friend of mine who was working on borreliosis in the United States. But my recent involvement with the Cheetah project, some of the ticks which were found in the system there in Kuno National Park were examined by one of the very high-profile veterinary laboratory in India. And they called me that we have found Borrelia in these ticks. That was quite, thing for me to understand that how come Borrelia has entered India. This is a new disease in India. And then I read the literature about it. And then I read that Armed Forces, the Journal of Armed Forces of Government of India, there is a medical journal. There is a lot of cases recently they have published about Lyme borreliosis. It is a tick-borne disease. It is a registered disease. It is not a very old disease, not known to human beings. It was only in 1976 that this disease was first known to humans in an area in the United States known as Connecticut. And this is a disease which is spread from the ticks. Ticks are the carrier of this disease. When you walk through a forested area, these ticks from the deer, they attach to the grass blades. And when you're walking to the forest area, these ticks will attach to your clothes. And if that a particular tick has borreliosis in it, that borreliosis will be transferred. One of the very, very important systems, because a lot of cases are being noticed in Himalayan region of borreliosis. Haryana is particularly, I don't know why there are a lot of cases happening in Haryana of borreliosis. There are a lot of cases happening in Arunachal Pradesh. So I think my couple of colleagues are working in Arunachal Pradesh. They should be very careful of ticks. So one of the very important symptoms is you see the patch in this picture. Are you able to see this patch? Right? I'm asking the organizers, are you able to see this patch in the slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is a very, very important patch. There will be a center reddishness, and then there will be a light color area, and then there will be a larger ring, which will again be a dark color. If you see after working in a forested area, and if you see that you have a tick bite, if you see this kind of patch, you need to be immediately connecting the proper hospital and physicians who have knowledge about this disease. This is a very serious disease. This affects your heart, this affects your nervous system, and if it is not diagnosed properly, then it is a large number of cases are fatal. At the same time, there is another disease which many of you must have, scrub typhus in a couple of states in India. Scrub typhus, a disease which is spread by mites. And mites are there everywhere. But we need to be, and why the mites are there everywhere? Because living conditions, it deteriorated, an environment with deteriorated living conditions, there will be a lot of infestation of the mites always there. And lot of mites means there can be availability of lot of pathogens in the environment. Apart from this whole issue of these examples, linkages with biodiversity and some of the newer pathogens. If you see the Harrison's medical book, there is a medical school in NU, you can go there, you can have the old volume. If you see any volume of Harrison book of 1980s, you do not find mention of any disease which I have so far discussed. These are all new things. And why these new things? We will come, in next 5 to 10 minutes of our presentation. Now see, many of these examples are given in Eric Shivin book, and even in executive summary, which I told in the second slide. If you see, there are certain important pharmaceuticals, and probably the most important pharmaceuticals for the treatment of some of the very rare diseases, they're coming from the biodiversity. You can take example, morphine. You can take example of rosy periwinkle. You can take example of the aspirin. These are only few examples. And I have some other slides where there are at least 25 examples of the different plant sources like Texas, Makata, and Himalayas, which are providing some of the very, very important pharmaceuticals for the treatment of those diseases which cannot be treated by some of the pharmaceuticals which can be artificially created. So now the next thing is that, what is the environmental connection for some of these things? And many of these things which we have discussed, you must have seen, they involve some kind of vector, arthropod vector, like ticks, like mosquitoes. Take example here. What is the environmental connection? In this slide, you can see that there is a very deteriorating environment very close to our living. There is also a very deteriorating environment in terms of the air which we breathe. There is also, at the same time, there is a lot of increasing travel every day. the number of the people are traveling from one place to another place. And the travel becomes important for some of the diseases which are respiratory in nature, like influenza, like coronavirus, because they can spread through the respiratory droplets. And if a person is suffering, and traveling using the air mode of transportation, that just one person can spread the disease, that particular pathogen, in several continents in 48 hours, next 48 hours. That is why the pulmonary pathogens, which spread through droplets, become very important. Another very important environmental contamination is that our dependency in variety of ways on the biodiversity resources for the livestock, fodder, for food, for medicinal plants, and for firewood, and including the water. And there are many areas in different places in the world, not only in India, where there is a lot of interface conflict between wildlife and human environment. It is not only the livestock, but humans are also coming in close contact with biodiversity resources, including animals. And this kind of natural resource conflict becomes very important in terms of transmission of pathogens, vice versa. Not only pathogens, transmission of pathogens, vice versa, but some of the pathogens which have been restricted for a very long time only to the wildlife and have maintained a very, very important symbiotic relation with the wildlife and not causing any disease in wildlife. But now when they come into contact with human environment, they flare up and they cause disease. For example, I think all of you, all the people who are attending this presentation, you must have heard Ebola virus. So Ebola is the name of the river in Congo basin. The virus was discovered near that basin, near the Ebola river. That is why the name of the virus, Ebola virus, in Congo basin. So in Congo basin, there was a primate colony where the humans did not reach till 40 years ago. 40 years ago, they reached for bushmeat to that particular colony where this particular pathogen on maintaining a symbiotic relationship with the host. But now, when the humans came into contact with that micro pathogen virus, then it became very, very pathogenic or virulent for human beings. And you must be knowing that Ebola is the most important and very dreadful disease as far as any disease so far known to mankind. There is hardly any treatment for Ebola virus. And at the same time, there are a lot of geopolitical reasons in that region where Ebola originated, like Sierra Leone in Eastern Africa, that we have very difficult situation to control and contain the Ebola. Although many governments together are working very hard, that is why still Ebola has been confined to the Eastern African region of Sierra Leone. But situation may be difficult in the near future. If you see in Indian Central, there are a large number, one of the very important, risk which is being created by one of the very important antelope in India, nilgai, is that there are about 1.5 million blue bull ranging freely, enjoying, using the both habitat, the protected areas as well as the agriculture habitat. And they have become very smart, living most of the time at the edge of the protected areas and the agricultural landscape. So when there is a risk in agricultural landscape, they go inside the protected area where they are protected. When there is no risk, they are creating a lot of problems to the farmers in terms of using their crops. And the small farmers, when they are raided by blue bull, there is a very huge economic loss to the farmers. But apart from this thing, the blue bull has become a very, very important animal in terms of the transmission of pathogens, vice versa, from the protected area to the agricultural landscape, from agricultural landscape to the protected area, because they are coming in contact with both livestock, humans, as well as the wild animals inside. So this kind of situation is posing a very important risk to the wild animals, as well as important risk to the livestock and its diseases. The similar kind of situation, I am taking example of one of the very, very important disease, Asiatic lion, which is found only in Gir National Park in entire, world. Means this is a endemic species only to the India and that to Gir landscape in Gujarat. So I think the ABU has done a lot of work on Asiatic lion and they know all the situation there. But what actually happened, what is actually happening present is is the take example of the Serengeti lion mortality in 1994 due to the canine distemper, because 1994, before 1994, canine distemper was not supposed to be causing any disease in Asiatic lion, although the disease was present in the dogs there, in Masai Mara dogs, and lions were coming in contact with canine distemper, but there was no canine distemper. And we used to think that canine distemper is not the disease because the virus is not adopting, to the lion as its host. So we were considering that lions are quite safe. Even the canine distemper is present all over the Serengeti Masai Mara region. But what pathogens do? This is very important, and I'll take shortest period of time to make you understand this thing. When a pathogen is coming in contact, what pathogens are trying to do always in their life is that they are trying to expand its host range. The reason is that microbes know when there is a larger host range, they have much better chances of survival. If there is a very narrow range, then they know that humans can control, the humans can have preventive measures, humans can treat, humans can eradicate you. For example, FMD. FMD is a disease which is found only in clone hoof animals. Clone hoof means bifurcated hoofs. FMD cannot be found in carnivores. FMD cannot be found in equids. FMD cannot be found in humans. FMD is a disease which is restricted to only the clone hoof animals, means largely ungulates. So FMD has a very narrow host range. Because of its narrow host range, many countries have been able to control and eradicate FMD. But take example of rabies. Rabies has the widest host range. That is why, in spite of knowing that it is the most fatal disease of any species, including humans, and it is the oldest disease known to the mankind, but still we do not have any treatment of the rabies because it has a very, 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 very wide host range. So what actually happened? Over the period of time when the Masai Mara dogs were coming and canine distemper was coming in contact of the lions in that ecosystem, the virus changed little bit, which happens very rare event, like corona. It was a very rare event because of the little bit of mutation in that virus. So because of this little bit of change, they were able to cause the disease in lions. And because they were able to cause the disease in lions, the lion mortality was very severe. About 1,000 lions died in the period of 6 months out of the total population of 2,000. But there was a lot of cohesive collaboration and cooperation between the different governments, and many countries and many experts came into support of the finding the cause and then the management, further management. And since then, there have been only few cases. The disease had not been reported to that extent. But now what has happened, that canine distemper virus got established in its lion population. And in India also, there have been very large scale mortality in 2018 and 19 of canine distemper virus. I have seen the reports of the National Institute of Virology. It is the same strain what was found in Eastern African subcontinent. So now the Asiatic lion population is susceptible to canine distemper virus. Lion is such a species because it lives in a pride and it can be approached at least to 30-40 meters distance. What I have recommended at several occasions is that there are very effective canine distemper vaccines. And when the animals live in pride, you can reach to a pride, approach about 50-60 meters, and you can use the tele injection systems to at least vaccinate some of the lions. Even if you are able to vaccinate only 10 to 20% of the Asiatic lion population in Gil, you will be safe that in any kind of catastrophic event of canine distemper virus, your all populations will not die, and there will be concept of herd immunity. So even if you are vaccinating 10 to 15% of the animal, there is a likelihood that you will be able to protect in case of any kind of canine distemper virus episode. You will be able to protect at least 50 to 60% of your Asiatic lion population in Gil. So there are other environmental things which are happening, like, many things like, contaminated air and the human waste available, where there is a combination of the domestic animal, wild birds, wild reservoir hosts like rats, and many vectors present together in very close environment to humans. This has become very, a mixing vessel for many microbes to survive, and not only to survive, but expand its host range, and also create a situation where a lot of risk is available to the society from these pathogens. So these kind of which we can say the pollution of the environment has become very important in terms of providing the environment a very suitable environment for many important and lethal and virulent microbes. So this is a very important slide, and I think with this slide, if you try to understand, you will understand. And I will recommend that based on this lecture, I think some of the very important places like AMU should think of not only studying the ecological attributes of maybe hyena in some place, or maybe some kind of black box studies around Aligarh area, but you should think in terms of now expanding your horizon in terms of studying some of the very important health issues present in wildlife, and some of the very important genetic issues in wildlife. If you see some of the conservation departments in top universities and institutions around the world, in Europe and especially Western Europe and United States and other places, they are now doing variety of other species. You have to come out of this only doing ecological studies to the multidisciplinary studies, where you involve the ecologists and hydrologists and disease experts and entomologists, so that you understand that why a particular type of thing is happening, which is important for survival of wildlife. So unless you have this multidisciplinary influences in providing the outcome of the study, that most of these studies remain incomplete. I'm not saying that basic ecological studies are not important, but at the same time, I think the most of the studies should be at this point of time, because of the kind of things which are emerging in the environment. The most of the studies should be now the multidisciplinary. So as far as humans are concerned, if you see, for about 2000 years, we were only worried about one or two diseases: small cholera and smallpox and typhus and plague. 1918, 100 million human deaths. This plague, I'm saying flu, is a influenza A viruses. So what happened? That there was a discovery of antibiotics around let's say about 40s, but the proper antibiotics were available only around 1960. So in 1960, we thought that we have control every situation as far as the health of humans and animals are concerned, because antibiotics. And there was a conference which was a very large conference of the leaders of the pharmaceutical industry, leaders of the human health industry, medical schools, and the leaders of the animal health industry, that we have found the ultimate solution. Now we have the antibiotics, so we don't need to worry about any pathogen. And this was actually happening for a couple of years. But after 1980s, the new diseases started emerging. The reason was that antibiotics or antimicrobials, they have very short life, 5 years, 6 years. Because once you bring an antibiotic in the system, the microbes are also very smart. They start developing resistance. And there are also other reasons for resistance, because an antibiotic not getting prescribed in a proper way. A patient not knowing, the patient is whether animal or human, not knowing how to correctly take this antibiotic. Whether this antibiotic needs to be taken with the food, because if antibiotics it needs to be taken with empty stomach, like azithromycin, and if you are taking with the food, that 50% of the effectiveness of that antibiotic is gone. So now you are providing the chance for the microbe against which you are taking the antibiotic to develop resistance. So this is one example. There are many ways that how the antibiotic resistance is developing. And antibiotic resistance is a very, very important topic these days, because we do not have any new antibiotic in pipeline. I'm saying we do not have, doesn't mean only India, but in the world. We do not have any new antibiotic and solid antibiotic in pipeline which can come in next 5 to 10 years. The reason is that there is a dwindling of funding for the research on antibiotics. In the beginning, around 80s, there was a huge amount of funding. Government was also funding. But now, the most of the funding for this kind of research is being provided by the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical industries are interested in providing funding for those pharmaceutical compounds which have very long life, like medication for diabetes, medication for blood pressure. Because if a person starts taking blood pressure medication at the age of 40, that person will keep on taking that medication till that person survives. And these medications have very long life. There is no resistance. So there is a more and huge amount of profit in those kind of drugs in comparison to developing a antimicrobial agent. So the funding is an issue, and because of funding, who is requiring funding? The funding is required by researchers like you guys, the professors, the postdocs, the PhD students. If you see any new compound which has been developed in the last 30-40 years, whether it is a medicine against cancer, this is all research is done by basically the institutions and the universities and postdocs and professors. So these professors and these universities and these research institutions do not have the government funding for antimicrobial agent. So now, coming to the environmental connections, and these are some of the examples, but let me go back a little bit and tell you. So after 70s, we have noticed the Lyme disease, HIV, AIDS, Ebola, mad cow, which is spongiform encephalopathy, West Nile virus, SARS. SARS is like corona, related to corona 2 virus, and avian influenza and tuberculosis and Nipah, Hydra, chronic wasting disease, screaming Congo, hemorrhagic disease, Cassonal forest disease, SARS-CoV-2, and MERS. MERS is also related to SARS-CoV-2, but MERS is the Middle Eastern region of the world. It will be very difficult for you to understand that we have screaming Congo hemorrhagic fever in a couple of states in India. And when we check the retrospective samples which are stored for some other regions, we have found the presence of CCHF in samples as old as 25 years ago, around 90s. And CCF, if you see the origin of CCHF, it is Eastern Europe. So we don't know how the CCHF came to India. Like we don't know how the Borrelia came to India. Borrelia is a new disease which was first noticed in Connecticut region of the United States in 1976. And now it is there in many parts of the world, including in India, Arunachal Pradesh and Haryana and many other regions. So what is happening? If you see all these pictures, first picture is a ticks, second picture on the finger is a mite, then there are mites, then there are lice or fleas, then there are rats and bats and mosquitoes. If you see any of these diseases, except tuberculosis, the new disease in the system for last 40 years, these are the vectors which are responsible. Like bats are responsible for coronaviruses. Mosquito responsible for all the important diseases like dengue in India, SARS, chikungunya, or anywhere else. And there are many other important diseases like malaria, falciparum. So these are the most important 5-6 vectors. Now, what I'm trying to say through this slide is that we are focusing only on treatment, diagnosis, and treatment. We are not focusing how to control these vectors, how to reduce the population of these vectors, how to control that these vectors will not be able to transmit disease to livestock and humans. If these vectors were not be able to transmit the pathogen, if there is very controlled population of mosquito, you will not have dengue. You will not have malaria. You will not have Zika. You will not have chikungunya. If you do not disturb the habitats for the bats, then the corona will not be there in the human environment, right? The corona has come to the human environment because we are approaching the bat caves to find something in them, right? So what I'm trying to say that at the same time, not only the diagnosis and the treatment, but we have to also focus our efforts in doing basic ecological, epidemiological research on these vectors so that we can reduce the vector population, we can control these vectors. Once we control the vectors, these diseases will not be there in the human system. So you see, this is the connection. We were talking about environmental connection. If you see, the malaria is linked to climate and weather. You are providing more and more habitat for the mosquito to breed. If you are providing more habitat, then definitely you will be expecting dengue, you will be expecting malaria, you will be expecting chikungunya and Zika viruses. Influenza A viruses. If you are trying to bring a poultry farm or a nice poultry farm, and if you are allowing the backyard poultry to go to the habitat of the migratory birds in a wetland near Kaziranga or wetland near Aligarh, then definitely if they are carrying the influenza A viruses, then the influenza A viruses will be transmitted to the domestic outlet. It is not necessary. It will be a very rare event that even after the transmission, that influenza A virus will be able to cause any disease. You need a particular type of, genetic makeup of the influenza A virus. There are about 247 strains of influenza A viruses. You need a particular genetic makeup of that particular strain to cause the disease, which rarely happens. But when it happens, then it is very devastating. So Ebola is related to the human behavior, because why don't you leave that, why you want to have the bushmeat in such a remote area? Let the primate colony live in peace. The humans are approaching every bit of place and disturbing the habitats. So that is why, human behavior is also responsible for some of the very, very important diseases. Lacrosse is a very interesting story. And Lacrosse is a story where around the river Mississippi, in a small town known as Lacrosse, there was a virus. But what happened around the Mississippi, the large tracts of forest were cut due to some region about that was around 1980s. So now these tree stumps are there with the snow, because there is a 5-6 months of very heavy snow in Lacrosse town because of the Midwestern United States. There were small holes in these tree stumps which were remaining there after the timber was taken. So now, once the snow will melt, there will be a lot of water remains accumulated in hundreds and thousands and lakhs of tree stems, which will provide a perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes. There are more, because this disease is transmitted by mosquitoes, more Lacrosse virus got transmitted in and around those towns, and then the geographical area got increased of the Lacrosse virus. So human behavior is also responsible for the spread of many pathogens. So in summary, the humans are primarily responsible for a lot of degradation of the environment, and this degradation and disruption in the environment plays a very important role in the emergence of some of the very important and deadly pathogens for humans as well as animals. Toxic pollutants are very important, and if you see the great amphibian loss which is taking place right now while we are having this presentation, and hundreds of scientists working on amphibian loss around the world, but we don't know what is the solution for that, because we are not able to stop the toxic pollutants which are responsible for depression of the immune system in birds and fish and lot of amphibian wildlife. Travel and population also plays a role, but travel and population growth plays a role in a very complex manner. But travel is important when there is a pulmonary pathogen already in the system to spread from one place to another place very quickly. Political economic disruptions, like we have seen in East African subcontinent, when there is a continuous political and economic disruption. So what happens is that healthcare systems are not there in place. Whether it is animal health systems or human health systems, they get disrupted. And once there is a disease outbreak, there is nobody to take care of the disease outbreak. So there is a potential of that disease spreading to very large number of people and then getting transmitted to a large geographical area. There is a global, I touched a little bit about the reasons for antimicrobial resistance, and there are reasons for that. And there is a lot of studies currently going on as far as the antimicrobial resistance is concerned. As I told you that there is no proper antibiotic in pipeline, at least for next 5 to 10 years, which is a very scary thing. So I just, you can have just a very quick look. There are large number of diseases which are transmissible to man from wildlife. There are bacterial, viral, fungal, parasitic, and the region is contact transmission when you directly come into contact of a wildlife. If you are not following proper, prescription protocol, that when you are working with wildlife, what kind of tools you need, what kind of clothing you need, what kind of other accessories like gloves and, disinfectants you need while you are working with wildlife. So that is why, there can be contact transmission. In many other countries, there are very, very important restrictions as far as when you handle with wildlife, that what kind of protocol you have to follow. You can download some of these protocols from the internet, from the site of the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta. There are arthropod transmission, very important transmission of arthropods. Some of the very, very important parasitic diseases are being transmitted by arthropods in wildlife, like babesiosis and filariasis and trypanosomiasis. So these are arthropods. So if you do not have an arthropod, what I'm trying to say, even if you come in contact with another host which is suffering from this disease, but without the involvement of arthropod vector, you will not get this disease just by contact. But there is an elementary and fecal transmission of, I told you that the anthrax spores can survive in soil for 60 years. And there are anthrax pockets as far as the humans and wildlife is concerned in Indian subcontinent, particularly in Northeast India and parts of Odisha in India. So now these are last two slides. I think it has gone very heavy on all of you, but let's see some positive picture. So most people are talking of One Health, but it is, I have participated with many people, this new One Health things, but most people are having difficulty in understanding that what One Health means. Just by organizing a meeting on One Health, just talking about that diseases are zoonotic in nature, this is not One Health. This is not One Health at all. We have to understand that what is the connection of the environment and why that kind of connection, which is because of the human behavior, is providing some of the very, very important linkages to the microbes coming into the human contact and causing disease, changing or mutating, in that environment. So unless we understand this complexity of the environmental connection, and then see that what are the different things we have to do in terms of understanding the ecological attributes of a pathogen and ecological attributes of any kind of vector is involved in that transmission of the pathogen, it becomes very, very difficult to either control or eradicate. Still seeing the Corona 2 very recently, and we have seen the sufferings of humans. Still, I think most people are getting into a difficulty in understanding that what needs to be done. People are working in their own domain. They have difficulty, not saying everybody, but largely people have difficulty in understanding that a situation like Corona, which is there causing disease in many important wildlife also, situation like Corona cannot be tackled, or situation like Ebola cannot be tackled. A situation like, arboviral disease cannot be taken unless the ecologists, the conservation biologists, right, the professionals from human medicine, the professionals from animal health sector, the professionals which are, experts in arthropod vectors, entomologists, the persons who are very important in terms of ecological monitoring and mapping of the natural resources, right? Unless all of us together, we work little bit on some common issue and problem, then only we can find a proper solution. We are trying to work in isolation, and at the end of the day, all our solutions are incomplete in nature. So what I'm trying to say is that if you want to talk about One Health and a healthy environment for everybody, like animals and humans, and including plant species, then there has to be a multidisciplinary effort working on larger projects where there is a lot of very large teams working from different disciplines to find a good and common solution for. So this is in short that some kind of actions, and I wish that AMU can start a multidisciplinary project because there is a good number of medical faculty there. There are other expertise available in engineering, and every kind of expertise is available in that large university. So I think the Department of Wildlife Science and AMU should develop a project where there is a multidisciplinary involvement, and that can be setting an example, because it is the department which was probably the first wildlife science department in our country. So I think they should develop a proposal with multidisciplinary influences and expertise, and show some results, very positive results, which can then the example can be taken by many other institutions and departments in the country. So this is the final recommendations that we have to have. Also, not only the synergy between the different disciplines, but we have also, to develop our improved capabilities at a short span of time, because there is no time left for experiment and then learning. So we need to have a lot of international collaboration. We need to talk to the people who have done some substantial work in these areas, and we need to develop collaborative efforts so that we can reach at the level in minimum possible time. And instead of doing experiments and then taking 20 years or 30 years or 40 years to reach to their status, and by the time they will be further ahead of us. So I think international collaboration to improve the capabilities is very, very important. But also, each project should have something related to, what is happening in terms of the climate change and weather conditions. There are two very different aspects of like the climate change and weather conditions. So, and there are very important linkages between most of the health issues in the recent times, which we have seen. So with these words, I conclude my talk. So thank you so much for the time and patience. And I wish you all the best. And if there are any questions, I'm very happy to share any question.
Thank you very much, respected sir, for such an informative and enriching keynote address. There are questions from the participants, and I and Mr. Alyan will read out those questions one by one.
Thank you, Ms. Hana. The first question is from Sayyida Alina Khan, and the question is, how does the One Health approach addresses the interconnection of human, animal, and environmental health in combination of zoonotic diseases, in combating zoonotic diseases?
First thing is that let's simplify this whole thing. First, you have to understand what is zoonotic. Zoonotic a disease. I hope you already understand that any pathogen which can be transmitted, or in other simpler words, which will not differentiate between a human being and an animal, right? And there are examples of, it is not only animal and human being, there are other examples of where birds are also involved, right? The animals and human beings and birds, they can cause disease in, everywhere. So if you want to apply, if you want to resolve some kind of very important zoonotic issue, like influenza viruses. So unless you have the concept of One Health, that where from and why this disease is coming to the human environment, what is One Health? One Health is not only simply the treatment and diagnosis of a disease, but it is also what is its connection with the environment, why it is coming. Why the chikungunya, why there is a more chikungunya, why there is a more Zika virus in this particular year? Is there any relation to the floods? Is there any relation to the lot of rains? Is there any relation to the lot of availability of habitat for that mosquito or for that particular other vector like mites or like ticks. So what I'm trying to say is that unless if you want to establish a connection and to resolve the problem in terms of its eradication and control, you have to have this multidisciplinary team from a variety of sources, and that concept and that approach is known as One Health.
The second question is from Tanzim Aziza. Her question is, certain tribes and people live in close proximity with the species. So what are the mitigation measures that can be practiced for the prevention of zoonotic diseases in such cases?
You know, one important thing is that there is a very little information available as far as the health of the people is concerned in very remote areas. Like when I say remote areas, like, people who are not coming into, not having the ability to either due to economic reasons or due to many other reasons, there can be cultural reasons, they are not coming into contact of the proper medical care. And sometimes even if the medical care is available, they do not trust the medical care, modern medical care. They will probably believe what are some of the traditional medicines they have been using for a long time. So the one very important thing is that we do not know the status of what is the health issues existing in those very remote populations. But sometimes when we come to know when there is something very important happening, like in terms of anthrax, like in case of Odisha, lot of the first people who are coming into contact of the anthrax is tribal people. And anthrax is a very serious zoonotic disease, it's a bacterial disease. Although the only positive point with anthrax is that anthrax can be treated with very well with some very earlier antibiotics like tetracyclines. So important thing is that first thing that most of the health issues in tribal populations are not known. And the second thing is that they are still using very traditional methods. But there are certain places where we come to know, because if the disease is kind of important, which is causing high rate of mortality, then we come to know that what has happened, like it happens in case of anthrax. But I think the proper answer to your question is that this is a very important area. And I think the animal science people and human health people should take some kind of important pilot projects in these areas to understand some of the very important health issues of our tribal populations in remote areas.
The third question is from Anmol Tyagi. He is from Bulandshahr district. And the question is, at the present, we note that the continuous decline in biodiversity and environment, and also in future, there is a big problem of decline in population of living organisms. So how we can protect our environment and save animals, and how we utilize limited resources?
You are asking questions which even the world leaders for last 20-30 years, doing very huge international conferences and meetings, and different things have come, different organizations, international organizations have come. People are talking about climate change, and they are talking about the a variety of things. At the end of the day, have you seen something happening, a very positive or maybe some kind of resolution to some of the issue which you're talking about? The reason is that this is a very complex thing. Population is expanding. We are becoming very consumer-oriented society. So unless there is a very important discipline in the human society, and human society changes its behavior. For example, there are many good things are also happening in various countries. It was about 20 years ago, I was visiting a friend in Melbourne. And then, after food, I took my plate and, I was trying to keep my plate in the sink. So, and that was fine. So, but I thought that, I'll just wash my plate. So I opened the tap. So So my host started crying that Pradeep, do not open the tap. Water is a very, very important resource, and we will put in the dishwasher. And Melbourne, in Melbourne area, every Australian citizen is very, very careful about every single drop of water. So that was their answer. So what I'm trying to say, there are many areas in the world, many places in the world where there is an increasing not only awareness, but you can see a positive change in terms of the living conditions and living environment. It's not that situation is only deteriorating everywhere, but the question you have asked is that if we want to improve the living, our living or our environment, then it has to be almost everybody on this planet. Now, when I say everybody on this planet, why? Like take example of pulmonary disease. If there are out of 100 countries, 98 countries are taking due care so that the influenza viruses will not come to the human system. But if the two countries are not taking and the pathogen emerges, a new human influenza virus emerges, this new human influenza virus, just one flight from the international airport will take to all those 98 countries who are taking proper care of not to allow influenza to come to the human environment. So what I'm trying to say, to really resolve these issues, that every human being on this planet has to behave very responsibly. And without that, it is going to be very difficult to see a very healthy and peaceful and good environment around us.
So the next question is from Manam Vashne. Her question is, what are the potential efforts of invasive species on the transmission of diseases in native wildlife population?
First thing is that you have to see that what are the native invasive species in India. So as far as the wildlife is concerned, and as far as the protected areas in India is concerned, I'm not sure of whether there is any invasive species as far as the wildlife is concerned. There are plant species, invasive plant species like Parthenium and Lantana, which is taking a very, very important toll on the habitat conditions of protected areas, and most importantly, the habitat of ungulates. But as far as the invasive species is concerned, I can give another example of introduction of rabbits in Australian subcontinent. So rabbits were introduced in Australian subcontinent. There were earlier no rabbits, but that became because there was no predator. The rabbits became a very huge problem, and there were rabbits everywhere in the entire Australian subcontinent. So what they did, they introduced a disease of rabbits to get rid of rabbit population in Australia. You can read this thing, very interesting story on that. But what happened? The small population survived, and that small population became resistant to that particular disease. Now again, there are rabbits everywhere in Australia. So what we have to do, and if you know any, because I'm not sure of any invasive species in India, right? As far as the animals are concerned, but there are many invasive species as far as the plant species are concerned, and they are taking heavy toll on our vegetation, native vegetation in protected areas and biodiversity of the country. And this is causing a very huge and serious problem as far as the food plants or habitat of ungulates are concerned. And please try to understand, if there is the further deterioration in the habitat of ungulates, this is going to influence all the carnivore population of the present in protected areas.
The next question is from Infini Solomon. The question is, in controlling the vectors which are always wildlife, how do you balance it with wildlife conservation mechanism?
You see, what you're trying to say, I fully agree with you that mosquitoes also play a very important role in biodiversity, right? All insects, even those insects which are transmitting fatal disease, they have some important role to play. I fully agree with you. But not the way their population is increasing, right? not the way, you have mosquitoes everywhere. You have mosquitoes during the daytime. You have mosquitoes as soon as you step outside the house. You have mosquitoes inside your house. You go anywhere, you go to shopping center, there are mosquitoes. You don't need to have that level of mosquito population. So you need to control, but you need to also balance that you do not permanently destroy a species, right? So even if these vectors which are there, which are transmitting fatal diseases, they also play a very important role in the biodiversity, but their population needs to be limited, in a manner. And why their population is increasing, I told you that this is largely because of the human behavior. Humans are providing the environment and conditions where there is a more and more breeding of these vector populations, so that, and more vectors means more and more disease and more transmission. So the answer to limited answer to your question is, which is a not very easy question, but complex question, that we do not need to destroy the entire vector population, even though they are causing disease, but there are ways we can control the population.
So the last question from Nasir Hussain from Kashmir. He's asking, are there any bio alternatives for parasitic infections in animals?
There are many plants. This is a right question. I think, in Kashmir, we don't eat much of the palm, the beetle, right? But in many areas of the country, like, northeast and eastern part of the UP, we consume a lot of areca nut and there are many examples I know, but I'm trying to give you the best example. Lot of lot of catechu, right? There is a plant known as acacia catechu, and all this red thing which you eat in pan is from the acacia catechu, because bark has to be boiled, and then we get the extract and we dry the extract, that becomes katha, which provides redness. So the beetle, areca nut, and this catechu, both are antiparasitic. So even if there are many behavioral conditions in some parts of the country where there is a lot of opportunity available for parasitic diseases, especially I'm talking of intestinal parasites. I'm not talking of trypanosoma, which is a blood protozoan parasite, or I'm not talking of any other hemoprotozoan parasite, but I'm talking of parasites which are intestinal. And there are many important plant species which we eat on a daily basis, like basil, right? And many of the herbs which you cooking, many of them have antiparasitic properties, and especially I told you that beetle has very important component, and acacia catechu also has very important component, which are very well known antiparasitic drugs. So most people who are eating palm every day, they will have very less chances of intestinal parasites. And this catechu, katha, is also used. You must have heard that there is a lotion for some kind of rashes known as lactocalamine. So this slight pink color in lactocalamine comes from this catechu. This is astringent, actually. If you see the property of this catechu, it's an astringent property. And this is a very powerful natural astringent. So lactocalamine, which you buy from the medical shops, has catechu in it. So the answer to your question is that there are many species in the forested areas, as well as the many species which we consume on daily basis, have some level of antiparasitic influences.
So we have two more questions. This one is from Samarth Jain. His question is, can you elaborate a little how the ticks infected the cheetahs in Puno?
How the ticks are found naturally, in the environment. So ticks are there. If you go to south, in many protected areas, you'll have a lot of ticks. But I tell you something very important about ticks. But I'll answer your question a little later. But let me tell you about this. If you get infested with ticks, please be careful. Otherwise, you'll have miserable life for next 1 year or so. Do not remove ticks from your hand. If you remove the ticks by forcefully attaching from your skin, the ticks will leave its mouth parts in your skin. Now there will be reaction. Your body will respond to those mouth parts. And then there will be, rashes. And there will be a lot of itching, and you will keep on itching your skin like a mad person all the time. And you will inflame your skin. It will finally develop into some kind of very inflamed condition like eczema. And you'll keep on going to the doctors without any proper treatment or proper help. And it takes almost 1 year to get rid of this entire situation. But ticks are natural, naturally found in many ecosystems. But if you go to Rajasthan, like Ranthambore or Sariska, it also depends the kind of vector you will find in a particular area because of the many, many important things. Like, you'll be surprised to know that soil composition, the composition of the rocks, the composition of the plant communities, the presence of the humidity in that environment. So there are many, many things which will provide a particular type of environment to a particular type of life there. If you go to Sariska Tiger Reserve, you will not find any tick on any of the animals. We have immobilized many animals for radio-calling purpose in Sariska. And I was very surprised to see the excellent health of sambar and chital here in Sariska without any single tick. I have seen occasionally some ticks on the ear of blue bull, nilgai in Sariska, but they are eaten by the birds all the time. So there is no tick infestation. But if you go to the southern part of country, where there is a perfect environment, including soil conditions and the moisture available, humidity, for the ticks, you'll find a lot of ticks. So ticks are important part of ecosystem. So they are found, in many parts of the country, many parts of the world, everywhere.
Okay, sir. The last question is from Gagandeep Kaur. She's asking that what from your such long experience and expertise in this field can you say to a common man in making them aware of the present situation of the zoonotic disease outbreaks?
Okay, to make a common man understand, and I have tried this several times, many times, and you'll be surprised to know I try almost on daily basis to many people I come in contact with. For example, and this is a very important and very truthful example, that I am trying to train my gardener in hand and foot hygiene. Because as a gardener, if you are not maintaining your hand hygiene or foot hygiene, then there are chances of developing a particular type of fungal infection. And nail fungus is so important that once you get a nail fungus, it never goes. The first thing is that nail fungus treatment is very, very expensive. And some of the medications are not available in India, some of the lacquer which you apply on the nail. But if you take the medications for the fungus, which are parenteral in nature, they are harmful to many of your systems. So I am trying to educate him every day, but he's taking such a difficult time to really understand the whole situation. So what I'm trying to say is that to make the common person or a common citizen of our country, maybe a person from farming community, maybe a person working in on agricultural fields or rice fields, maybe a person who is just living in city and urban areas, but not having access to the knowledge in these areas, to provide the proper education and to make them convinced. This is a job of the communication experts to develop various type of mediums through the media, like some kind of plays, some kind of small films, some kind of literature in local language, some kind of demonstrations, some kind of doing camps in village areas, and finding those people who are suffering from some of these very important things, and making them aware, and making them also aware of the disadvantages of these situations. So These are only experts who can design such programs which can communicate and influence the local communities and citizens. This is a difficult situation if a scientist working on disease thinking that I can design a communication material for local citizens. It is not going to be possible because this requires a very special expertise and discipline. That is why I was talking in my entire presentation that unless you have multidisciplinary approach for all the things which you are talking about, it is very difficult to succeed. So one of the very important expertise which you required is the communication expert. So I think Dr. Gagandeep, who just asked this question, is from Pondicherry University or what? Okay, no problem. Any other question?
Sir, thank you very much, respected sir, for answering the questions. We are extremely grateful to you for sparing your precious time for delivering the keynote address. We wish you and your family a happy, healthy, productive, and joyful long life. Thank you very much, sir.
Great,
would
thank
now-
you so much, and thank you all the participants, and thank you the organizers and Dr. Everybody in the Department of Wildlife Science. I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and I'm also thankful to everybody who is presented this presentation. And please try to understand that this kind of presentation is not that very easy thing, but I have tried to simplify it, again and again. So thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Once again, thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
I now invite Mr. Raza to introduce our next speaker, Professor Gopi G.V.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Gopi G.V. is the professor and head of the Endangered Species Management Department at Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun. He joined WII in 2008, and since then, he has continuously worked on conservation and management of wildlife. His subject of interest include wildlife biology, protected area management, wetland ecology, and management. Dr. Gopi is a great scientist with 23 years of work experience in wildlife conservation. Dr. Gopi has completed about 22 research projects funded by different agencies like SIR, University Grant Commission, and Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change. 3 more projects are still ongoing. His research interests include identifying and prioritizing areas and species for conservation at landscape level. During his wildlife research career, he worked on the ecology of rare and threatened species such as Asiatic wild dog, orange-bellied Himalayan squirrel, common leopard, marine turtles, saltwater crocodiles, Indian skimmers, and colonial nesting water birds. Dr. Gopi has worked on a very challenging landscape like mangrove biology and ecology, aquatic species ecology and management, and lesser studied threatened fauna of northeastern states. Dr. Gopi has also worked on a very dynamic problem, human-wildlife conflict, in and around protected areas and investigated, documented ecological process and pattern following human-wildlife interaction. Dr. Gopi has integrated conservation planning for inland and coastal wetlands and forest landscapes, impact assessment of developing projects on wildlife or wetland habitats. Dr. Gopi has published about 60 research papers in peer-reviewed journals, 6 book chapters, and many popular articles. He has supervised 17 dissertations and 6 PhD programs. He also teaches in service forest officers from India and other Asian countries in wildlife management or wetland conservation and management. He is actively involved in developing, implementing courses related to biodiversity conservation, wetland and coastal habitat management, and protected area management. Dr. Gopi is also a nodal officer and head of Environment Impact Assessment Cell at WII. He promotes the integration of biodiversity concerns in environmental appraisal of development projects. Thank you.
I, on behalf of the organizing committee, extend a very warm welcome to our next speaker, respected Professor Gopi G.V. And I now invite him to deliver his talk titled Biodiversity and Wildlife Conservation in Northeast India. Over to Professor Gopi G.V.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the wonderful and elaborate introduction. Before I begin, I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. Jamale Khan, who in fact called me the other day, a couple of days back, and gave me this opportunity to be talking to you on a very interesting topic. I'm sure most of you maybe would not have seen certain species in real in your life. So based on which I'm going to be talking on them, and I'll be sharing some naturalist information, which probably none of you would have experienced or seen in your life. So that is for the later part of this talk. So I express my gratitude to Dr. Jamale Khan, the organizing committee, Dr. Nazneen, and all of you who are involved in bringing me to this talk and share my experience. So with this, let me share the presentation. Just let me know if you can see the slides. Is my slide visible? If not, put it in the slideshow mode. I'll go ahead with the talk. So,
Sure, sir.
to be talking about wildlife conservation in the Northeast India, it's going to be a very daunting task. Just that because the amount of information is available, will not be able to do justice in an hour or in a 90-minute talk. So what I'm going to be doing is, with a broad brush stroke, I'm going to give you certain glimpses of the biodiversity of the Northeast. Now, when we talk about the Northeast landscape comprises, you all might be knowing about, it comprises of various states, especially that of Arunachal, Assam, Manipur, Nagaland, Mizoram, Sikkim, and Tripura. And we also at times include the hilly tracts of the North Bengal districts of Darjeeling, places like Siliguri also we include within the ambit of the Northeast India. And this landscape can also be further, classified as North Bengal Duars, Brahmaputra floodplains, and Northeast Hill region. One interesting thing about the Northeast India is, it shares geopolitical boundaries with various countries like Nepal, Bhutan, Tibet, China, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. So this, and also the Northeast India is narrowly connected with the mainland India through a narrow strategic stretch called as the Siliguri corridor. Now, this landscape shares about 90% of boundary with neighboring country. So this brings a very unique geostrategic location in the country. Now, if you look at the cultural plurality, it is amazing. If you look at the biodiversity plurality, it is amazing. So in terms of cultural biodiversity, it's one of the, arguably the richest regions in the country. In addition to this, this particular landscape, the entire Northeast landscape, comprising of all these 8 states and parts of the North Bengal, have experienced in the past several kinds of habitat modification, land use, land cover change, habitat destruction. So there have been ethnic conflicts, so which has resulted in shaping of all these, biodiversity or wildlife in this region. We all know about extensive tea plantations that happens in the state of Assam. This has been promoted by the colonial government, erstwhile colonial government of during the British era. And previously, there have been a lot of game hunting that has happened, even including charismatic species like rhinos, elephants, tigers, wild buffaloes, by the erstwhile colonial governments, which had led to decimation of the populations of wildlife. But if you look at the habitat as such, so the Northeast India, although it is predominantly mountainous, the landscape is also it's also spread across mosaic of habitat features geographical features like you have snow-capped mountains in the Trans-Himalayan regions, you have plateaus, you have valleys, you have foothills, you have vast alluvial floodplains of Brahmaputra. And in fact, if you look at the geography of the Northeast, three major rivers of the country, you all know about the Brahmaputra, the Teesta, where it originates from Sikkim, and which is the lifeline of Sikkim, and another major river, the Barak Basin, is also a major river. And all these three rivers, tributaries, crisscross the entire region of the Northeast, and this shapes the biological wealth, ecological wealth, cultural wealth of the Northeast. And Northeast region is also high in endemism, and so this landscape is a endemic bird area as well. Now, if you look at biogeographical terms and biodiversity terms, so the Northeast region has two biodiversity hotspots, the Himalaya and the Indo-Burma biodiversity hotspot. So two biodiversity hotspots of the four biodiversity hotspots in the country is present in this region. And it is also located at the juncture of three biogeographic realms, the Indian realm, the Indo-Malayan realm, and the Indo-Chinese realm. So this combination of three different realms, two biodiversity hotspots, represents diverse habitats associated with varying climate, varying altitudes, and this gives rises to amazing floral and faunal diversity. If you look at forest types, there are Assam Valley, foothills, parts of Naga Hills and Manipur Hills. There are deciduous forest. There are temperate forest in Shillong Plateau, Naga Hills, and Mishmi Hills. So, if you look at the faunal wealth of the region is extremely diverse. Like you have 13 species of primates, extremely rich in primate diversity. 4 large cats. You have tigers, leopards, snow leopards, and clouded leopards. There are different bear species like Asiatic bear, sloth bear, Malayan sun bear. There are canid species, wild dogs, and jackal. And so there are charismatic species like elephants, gaur, one-armed rhinoceros, tiger, obviously, and wild buffalo. Now, with this background, what I'm going to do is we are going to take you and we are going to go through state-wise and look at some of the important protected areas, some of the important species, and then toward the end, we'll look at conservation issues for each of these states. Before we further proceed, one of the major lifeline for the Northeast is the Brahmaputra River. So how does this Brahmaputra influence Northeast is beyond imaginable. So this brings in a lot. The Brahmaputra brings in a lot of water, obviously. In addition to the water, it brings in a lot of sediment load from the Tibetan plateau, and these sediments comes and settle down as the river enters into the state of Assam. It deposits a lot of sediment and soil, and this makes up one of the largest floodplains in the world, and also in India. So this floodplain is very rich in wildlife, and there are some of the important protected areas in the in the country. Now, Brahmaputra also acts as one of the natural barrier in the region. Natural barrier in the sense animals cannot cross from southern bank to the northern bank, or vice versa, from the northern bank to the southern bank. Species like hispid hare, species like pygmy hog, so species like the golden langur. So these are all present on the northern side of the river, and there are also a lot of other species which cannot cross over the majestic, mighty river and come down to the southern bank. Vice versa, hula gibbons at many places cannot cross over, and so this river acts actually as a natural barrier and shapes the diversity and richness of wildlife in the region. So first we'll look at the state of Sikkim. So I cannot get into detail, very much in detail for each of the state, but I'll just give certain very important things that one needs to know, and some important key features of each of the state. If you look at Sikkim, a very small state, but very rich in wildlife. You have a lot of protected areas. Some of them like the rhododendron Bursay sanctuary, and in the North Sikkim, the wildlife values are immense. You have Kanchenjunga National Park, which is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, as it has got outstanding universal values in terms of harboring several species. See, these are the important protected areas: the Kanchenjunga National Park, the Phambanglo Wildlife Sanctuary, very close to Gangtok. And some of the species that you see is black-necked cranes. In fact, in the northern part of the Sikkim, the North Sikkim, the black-necked cranes, only breeding site in the eastern Himalaya is found in this particular area called as the Mogutang Marshes in the North Sikkim. You have red panda, very good distribution of red panda in the entire state of North Sikkim. You have snow leopards and several plant species. One thing I would like to highlight about Sikkim Trans-Himalaya. Trans-Himalaya, it's a separate biogeographic zone, and it is found almost in the northern district of the North Sikkim. And you have certain important wetlands like the Guru Dongmar Lake, and it is also contiguous with the Tibetan Plateau. Why is this particular area, a small area, a Trans-Himalayan region in Sikkim, why is it so important in terms of wildlife? That is because it harbors globally threatened species like 4 out of 8 Tibetan ungulates are found in this small area of maybe less than around 1,000 odd square kilometer. The Tibetan argali, Tibetan gazelle, you have southern kiang, you have black-necked cranes, and in fact, black-necked cranes breeding. Black-necked crane is the only high elevation crane, high altitude crane. And this is how the landscape looks like. In the winters, it's completely covered with snow. And in fact, we have lost the Tibetan antelope. We have lost Chiru. Chiru has become locally extinct in the Trans-Himalayan region of Sikkim. So 1844, it has been documented. You can, but of late, we do not have Chirus there, and Chirus have become extinct. And you look at the Tibetan gazelle population, about 73% of the country's population is found in the small Trans-Himalayan region of Sikkim. Tibetan argali, about 30% of the country's population is found in this region. Southern Kiang, there are only 25 individuals are present in these alpine regions, and it is different from the other subspecies of the Kiang that you find in the Western Himalaya. There are 100% of country's population. If you have to see the Southern Kiang, you have to go to this place in the North Sikkim. As I told, black-necked cranes, the only breeding location, known breeding location in Indian part of Eastern Himalaya is in the North Sikkim. There are wintering grounds elsewhere in Arunachal Pradesh in the Tawang district, but this is the only breeding ground. Very recently reported when we went for a survey, we actually recorded black-necked cranes breeding in this Mogutang marshes. You have blue ship, you have Himalayan marmots, the Pallas cat, and you have red foxes. There are yak herders there who are inhabitants of this place. Of late, there have been a lot of issues pertaining to, there are a lot of roads that are coming into this. When roads come into a pristine area, the first impact that it brings is, it brings in a lot of free-ranging and feral dogs into the landscape. Once the free-ranging dogs come in, we have plenty of information, scientific literature, how these free-ranging dogs can impact the native wildlife, how it can impact the biodiversity. So there are issues within there are conservation issues that comes into this landscape. I would suggest, if any of you are interested in Trans-Himalayan wildlife, especially that of Sikkim wildlife, this particular paper published in Oryx, though it is very old, more than a decade old, but it gives immense natural history information of how 4 of the Trans-Himalayan ungulates are distributed here. And so it's a very worth reading. Coming to the Assam, one of the largest state in the northeast, have many national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. It has got biodiversity heritage sites. Obviously, the Brahmaputra River and the Barak River flows through this. Some of the important protected areas, you have Kaziranga National Park, Manas National Park. Both of them are also tiger reserves. Nameri National Park, again a tiger reserve. And you have Holongwe Park, Gibbon Sanctuary, one of the important landscape for gibbons. In terms of species, you have, if you look at Kaziranga, Kaziranga has got one of the highest assemblage of the, in terms of ungulates, in terms of prey species for tigers. You have swarm deer, hawk deer, you have barking deer. So you have, plenty of diversity of prey species. You have one-horned rhinoceros, a flagship species of Kaziranga for the state. You have hula gibbons and the state bird, the white-winged wood duck. The hula gibbons are one of the only ape species that we have in the country. There is no other ape species. We have other apes like orangutans and chimpanzees. We do not have them, but the only ape that we have is the hula gibbons. So these hula gibbons are obligate canopy dwellers. They are arboreal primates, and they are obligate canopy dwellers. That means they have to be there in the canopy. They don't come down to the ground for movement from one place to other. But their habitats are very gravely threatened in many areas. I would like to share one small study that the WIA conducted, in which I was involved. We were studying how a linear intrusion into a protected area, that is the Gibbon Wildlife Sanctuary, the Hulangapar Gibbon Sanctuary. When a railway, there is a railway track that exists, and how this is impacting the hula gibbon population. So this particular tract of 1.6 kilometers dissects through the Hulangapar Gibbon Sanctuary, a small sanctuary of 21 odd square kilometer. So what it has done is it has bisected the protected area, thereby creating a canopy width, wherein on the other side, on one side there are about 5 family groups, and another side there are about 20 family groups. Now these two have become disjunct. So once they become disjunct over a period of time, so this will lead to become a small population on either side, and then when there is no genetic exchange, and then they become small population, isolated population, and it can slowly, gradually lead to local extinction in that particular area. Now there are also plans for expansion of this particular, for doubling of this tract. And so now the canopy width is about 30 odd meters. Even this, the gibbons find it very difficult to jump over. So they have to brachiate and move. So this is not possible. Now there is more efforts are being planned to expand this doubling of this tract. In case if the doubling is going to happen, this canopy width may increase from 30 meters to 100 odd meters. Now this will make it impossible for the gibbons to cross over. So now WI, so we have myself and my team, so we had designed these canopy bridges, artificial canopy bridges, wherein the gibbons can try to cross over. So there have been studies elsewhere, there have been conservation efforts wherein in other gibbon species, the artificial canopy bridges have been built, and the gibbon populations have been connected. So this is an experimental way. We are planning to do it. So we have submitted our report, we have submitted the design features, and so now the state government has to further take it up as an initiative, and we submitted this particular report considering the importance of the artificial canopy bridges in connecting the populations. Very recently, we also published the finding of this work in Science Journal. We argued for why rerouting of the railway is essential, which can help in conserving our Indian gibbons. So this was published in Science, and we are taking forward with our recommendation, trying to work with the State Forest Department in trying to find a long-term solution for conserving one of India's charismatic species and one of India's only ape species that we have in our country. And Arunachal Pradesh, a very large state, 80,000 odd square kilometers, have very immense biological wealth, immense cultural wealth, very interesting state, crisscrossed by many significant rivers, the Kameng River, the Subansiri River, one of the major tributary of Brahmaputra, the Siang River, Dibang River, Lohit. So there's quite a lot of rivers, major rivers. There are a lot of protected areas. At least I think can think of 2 national parks, the P.K. the Moling National Park, Namdapha National Park. There is tiger reserves, 3 tiger reserves, the Kamlang Tiger Reserve, Namdapha Tiger Reserve, and Pake Tiger Reserve. So there are the immense network of protected areas, quite a lot of key species like tigers, red panda, black-necked cranes again, and Mishmi takin. So I would like to talk about very in brief about the Mishmi takins. Mishmi takins are basically a rare, least known bovid species. This species was described almost about 190 years now, and we do not have any information on this particular species. The reason being this, the habitat that the species dwells in is in a very high elevation areas, very remote areas, and other than the local people, outsiders do not know the kind of habitat where they live in, what kind of food habits are there, how is the migration pattern of these species. So a lot of things we do not know. The ecological knowledge, ecological baseline of these species is really not known. So now we are conducting a project on this particular species, trying to collect information on these species. So now we have identified certain congregation sites. Congregation sites are basically the areas where they come and congregate in huge numbers, more than 100 odd individuals or 200 odd individuals for a brief period of time, maybe about June to August, for maybe about 60 to 90 days. They come, and it's a calving ground as well. So they come and stay in these alpine pastures, very remote areas. In order to go to those areas, congregation sites, it might take to about a week's time to 10 days time, very arduous trek, and very important landscapes per se, and very important species per se. So I would like to just play this video of that we took from our camera trap image, camera trap video. So it lives in huge herds, and initially when they move, before they come into this particular salt lake, these are all salt lakes, these are all mineral lakes, rich in minerals. Before they come, so only the subadults, first couple of subadults or the juveniles come in, and then they first scout the area. And in case if they find the area to be very safe for the entire herd to come in, then only they will signal, and then the other herds will try to come, and only the adult bulls will tend to stay in the last, and then the female members and juveniles tend to follow the herd. So takin, a very important and interesting species. We do not have much information. Of course, it is endemic to Arunachal and this particular subspecies, but there are other 3 subspecies. One is found in Bhutan, and a couple of them are found in China. They are well studied in comparison to Mishmi takin. Not only that, the state of Arunachal Pradesh also has high altitude tigers. We know, it is not like Siberian tigers. So we also have tigers in our high altitude regions in very high snowing areas. And this was photo captured in a community managed land outside the protected area network in Dibang Valley district, almost about 3,600 or 3,300 to 3,600 odd meters in high elevation area. Very rich in wildlife again, in terms of even tigers, high altitude tigers. Good numbers of high altitude tigers are present in this particular area. You have then coming down to Nagaland, again a lot of rivers are there, major rivers, a lot of protected areas like Intanki Wildlife Sanctuary. You have tiger distribution sometimes coming in to Intanki from both the Myanmar side and also from the northeastern hillside. So it is known for Blight's tragopan, or a very important pheasant species that we have, a colorful bird, and very immense. We all know about the conservation success story of Amur falcons. Amur falcon, a long migratory bird which traverses from the North China to South Africa, and it goes through several countries, and India is one of the major stopover sites for the Amur falcons. Earlier it was heavily poached and heavily hunted and heavily trapped, but due to conservation interventions and conservation actions, the local communities are now in fact protecting these birds, and they take extreme pride in conserving the Amur falcons. So Amur falcons in the last few years have been one of the major conservation success story And this was highlighted by one of the finest naturalist, Ramki, and it was through his effort this particular bird received such huge conservation attention, and it has been very successful as well. So coming on to Manipur, and a very important state, a small state in the northeast, but very rich in wildlife. You have national parks like the Kaibulamjam National Park in the Loktak Lake. Loktak Lake is a Ramsar site, wetland of international importance, and the southeast portion of this particular lake harbors the small protected area of 40 square kilometers of the Kaibulamjam National Park, which has the only known existing wild population within India for the Manipur blue antlered deer or the dancing deer. They live in these fumdis, the thick vegetation, floating mass of vegetation, and it is also called as the floating national park. A very important species, and also the Siroi lily, which is endemic to the Manipur hills of Churachandpur and the Ukrul district, and it flowers very during the flowering season is very limited to the months of 15th of May to maybe 30th of June. Within just 30 to 45 days, the blooming happens for this Siroi lily flower, and very distinct floral species for Manipur and also for the country. You have and then the swamp deers. Meghalaya, again, very important state for a lot of important wildlife. In fact, the caves of, I think students from Aligarh Muslim University have gone and described certain species from the caves of Meghalaya. So I think you would be aware about how immense the wealth of caves for sustaining many wildlife species. So you have Balpakram National Park, you have Nokrek National Park. Hornbills are very rich. Nepenthes casiana, a very important pitcher plant, the Meghalaya pitcher plant, which is a very interesting species. You have clouded leopards, you have elephants coming into Meghalaya also are some of the important species. In terms of Mizoram again adjoining between Tripura and between Manipur, sandwiched between these two states, has two important protected areas. One is the Dampa Tiger Reserve and the Merlin National Park. So you have tigers in Dampa, but the numbers have gone down, and there are species like the Himalayan Sero, the red wanda, the epiphyte are distributed there. In terms of Tripura again, quite a lot of species are there. The important species for Tripura is, in terms of primate, it's the spectacled macaque, the monkey, which is the Phyris langur, which is an endangered species. You have a couple of protected areas like Sapajila Wildlife Sanctuary and Gumti Wildlife Sanctuary. There is a good population of gaur, a good population of clouded leopard. It also shares transboundary borders with that of Bangladesh. And in the North Bengal region, you have species like leopards, you have elephants. Elephants are in severe conflict. There are a lot of deaths also happens in the railway tracks, and also crop depredation problems are there. There are red panda there in the North Bengal, in Gurumara National Park and Mahananda Wildlife Sanctuary, Sapajila. One-horned rhinoceros are there, Bengal tigers are there, and one of the most important amphibians, that is the Himalayan salamander, the Tylotritron himalayensis. So this, why is it important is, obviously it is present in the wetlands. One important thing taxonomically is it represents one order called as the Chordata, and this is the only representative of this one family, one genus, and one species, which is the Tylotritron himalayensis. So this is a very important species. If you look at conservation issues, there are several conservation issues like habitat loss. You have deforestation, urbanization, infrastructure development. I spoke to you about, for one species, how linear intrusion can impact the habitat behavior of the gibbons with the case study. So there are also a lot of new initiatives like expansion for palm oil cultivation, which can have an effect on wildlife species. Like we have very well known example of how palm oil cultivation in Southeast Asia has decimated populations of orangutans. So there are cases of poaching still happening in certain states, which needs to be tackled. If you look at the path ahead, we'll have to enhance the protected area network. Maybe we can think of coming out with new ideas like having more community conserved areas, because these areas are all mostly community owned, and in fact many places they do a good job by protecting the local species. So there are in IUCN also tries to promote certain categories like the OECMs, other effective area-based conservation measures, the community conserved areas, OECMs. So all these things can have very important impact, long-lasting impacts. So involving the communities in conservation, identifying areas, promoting tourism and local communities benefiting through those ecotourism initiatives can be the path ahead. And of course, we need to have a lot of awareness and education for species. There are species like white-bellied heron, so there are very few in numbers, and they are found in the rivers of Lohit River and Noadhing, so which needs to be protected. In India, we have less than 10 individuals coming, so we need to protect them, and effort should be made to create awareness and educate about the importance of such species, and conserving the species can have in fact can serve as flagships and save the rivers where they are there. Of course, there are a lot of research and monitoring needs to happen. There are a lot of species that are getting described, rediscovered, discovered, especially the lower taxa like amphibians and herpetofauna species are even primate species, higher vertebrates are also getting described and discovered. So there are a lot of research priorities needs to be set in, so that ecological baselines for most important species are lacking here, so which can be enriched. And we also have to engage with public campaigns and garner more political support for conservation of the such very rich wildlife species in the Northeast. So with this, I would like to take time to thank my students. So most of the work that I've been doing is, with their effort. I would like to read out their names. Please, patiently hear me out. So Gaurav, Aisho, Kushiali, Avinash, Rohitja, Arif, Divya, Deepan, Siddharth, Udayraj, Sumit, and Gitima. So most of them are my PhD students, and some of them are my master's student. And so I would also like to thank many of my numerous friends and family from Northeast. Without their help, local families, without their help, we will not be able to do work in the Northeast. We have many field collaborators. I would like to thank them, all the forest departments, and my director, dean, and registrar for permitting me to interacting with you all. With this, I would like to thank you, all of you, and I'll be glad to take questions from you.
Thank you very much, respected sir, for your very informative and enriching talk on biodiversity conservation in Northeast India. There are questions from participants, and I and Mr. Anas will read out those questions one by one. The first question is from Priya Singh Kushwaha from Botanical Survey of India. She wants to know more about the Mishmi takin.
Pardon? Mishmi takin, is it?
Takin, yeah, she wants to know about that. Yeah,
Mishmi takin it's a bovid. It's a goat antelope, and it's a very rarely known species. As I said, several hundreds, about close to 2 centuries, the species has been described, but we do not have much information on it. Yeah, in fact, local people, the traditional knowledge on the species is amazing. So when we go and try to assess what is the population, where they are distributed, so we cannot do much justice to them. So we need to collaborate with the local communities, and through their traditional knowledge, we have been successful in identifying many areas, the congregation sites. Without their help, we will not have been able to attempt to identify. So yeah, we have been enriching some basic information on the species. We also have plans to collar them, fit transmitters, satellite collars, so that this has a transboundary movement from the Tibetan plateau. It comes into it has a very high elevational range. It can come from as below as 700 meters and then go up to 4,500 odd meters. So it has a very seasonal movement pattern. This has been quite well documented in the other takin subspecies, but not in this. So we are trying to enrich more information on their migratory pattern, their ecological patterns like food habits, and trying to assess important congregation sites. So our main aim is to identify key species within Arunachal Pradesh. So we want to identify, at least if you can identify congregation sites across Arunachal Pradesh, that itself is a very, which will yield amazing information. Yeah, thank you. Any other, next question, please.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, how critical is the current state of biodiversity in Northeast India, and what are the primary threats of wildlife conservation in this region?
In the Northeast, wildlife is very rich. As I said, it's arguably one of the very richest region in the country. So there are different species. So different species comes with different threat levels. Different species comes with resilience. Different species, has some kind of resilience to the threats. So we cannot just say that, there are several kinds. Like for example, you take one species like hula gibbons. So for hula gibbons, loss of habitat, loss of canopy, habitat destruction, habitat modification, conversion of primary forest into tea plantations. So these all can be one, kind of threat levels. So you take white-bellied heron. White-bellied heron, one of the major threat can be construction of hydroelectric power projects. If you change the flow, this species it lives in fast-flowing rivers. Undisturbed, unhindered flow has to be there. So there are different kinds of threat levels to different species. So maybe we cannot give a single prescription, but there are land use, land cover change can be one threat. Climate change obviously can be a threat to several species. Infrastructure development can also linear intrusions. So all these things can affect different species differently. But otherwise, in terms of wildlife, Northeast is doing great, and it's one of the richest region for wildlife.
Sir, the next question is from Debasis Jain. He is asking, what are some of the conservation measures undertaken by Wildlife Institute of India for the conservation of one-horned rhino in Assam?
So WI works with, there is a program called as the Roadies, and WI has a very, for a long time, we are trying to help in trying to estimate the population numbers, and we also collaborate with the state government, and we offer whatever expertise is needed in terms of wildlife health and also in terms of population monitoring. So Wildlife Institute tends to give technical and knowledge inputs for whenever the state government seeks our inputs.
Sir, the next question is, what is the role of gene banks in biodiversity conservation?
It's a very broad question, but yeah, you see, when we talk about biodiversity conservation, one of the most important thing is, species diversity and maintaining other diversity is good, but the most important thing is maintaining and managing the genetic diversity. So this gene, for having this gene pool and genetic diversity is very, very interesting. So like, for example, I spoke to you about the high altitude tour, the high altitude tigers. So these high altitude tigers are genetically very unique. So compared to the other tigers, other population of tigers that we have in the country. So in terms of even gibbons are also, there are 4 different populations: the northern population, southern population. So there are within the state of, within the range of hula gibbons within the country. So maintaining this genetic diversity is very, very crucial. Like for example, the Manipur brow-antlered deer, a small population, heavily inbred. And then when there is more inbreeding, there is more heterozygosity is very less. So then there is deformities in their antlers and deformities in, and then their reduction in their fitness levels. So there are efforts to increase their genetic fitness by having a second population, so that the genetic diversity is very high. Yeah. So yeah.
Sir, the next question is from Tanisha Dagur. She's saying, as seen in a recent report titled State of Indian Birds, SOIB, it was observed there was deficient data regarding the status of birds in eastern areas like Manipur, etc. What's your take on the citizen science initiatives and research studies on avifaunal diversity in East?
So there are obviously, when we look at the eBird data, so you will have more sightings, more observations being recorded from southern Indian states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu. So there are a lot of more people there, and so there are people uploading more lists. It also to relation in terms of people are very interested in the Northeast. So in terms of population, I think probably we have in other areas there are more population and people are loading more lists and more observation. So not only that, I think it is picking up and people are also now uploading a lot of information and uploading lists. Obviously, in next few years, we will get more information, more lists, more observation on many species. Like for example, you are saying about Manipur and other states of the Northeast. So there are a lot of very important bird areas within the state, important species like Sclatus monal, you have blackneck cranes, you have blight stragopan, you have immense wealth of birds in the Northeast, a lot of hornbills, very important in terms of seed dispersals. So they're very unique. And so I think over the period of time in coming years, I think there will be more observations recorded from Northeast, which is being recorded. Like, for example, areas like the Mishmi Hills are very important in terms of bird diversity. So yeah, you need to give time, and I think as time progresses, more informations will come out.
Sir, the next question is given a keystone species?
Pardon?
Is given a keystone species?
Like for example, yes, obviously, I can consider them as a keystone species. Keystone species in the sense you remove the species and they can the entire thing can collapse. In terms of if it is there in a particular habitat, this being a frugivore, so it has to feed on fruits, and then it disperses the trees. So it can be considered as a keystone species actually, because otherwise if gibbons are not there, so there might be other primates like stump-tailed macaque and other species are there. So we may consider them as keystone species. But in terms of like, if you ask me if the entire thing will collapse, which is doubtful, but yeah, we may consider them as it's a flagship species.
So the next question is from Dr. Jogendra Singh. He has queries regarding wildlife ecology and environment. He wants to know how to correlate each other or to understand the environmental conservation with wildlife ecology or environment, or separately.
So it's all the same, like so environment, ecology, wildlife. Like for example, these are all when you talk about ecology, you talk about the status and distribution of species and how these are shaped by environmental variables. So everything is linked. It's not just one is. It is all linked with each other. So the environmental variables influences how a species gets distributed and how its populations are controlled, or so it could be various limiting factors. So these are all, I think, basic information that we would all have studied. So yeah, to cut it short, it's all of them are linked up.
Sir, the next question is from Sayyida Alina Khan. She's asking, what role does technology play in monitoring and safeguarding wildlife in Northeast India, and are there any innovative approaches being implemented?
There are several. One thing is normally that what we do is trying to estimate the population is by we are using camera traps. So this is one, which is basic. So there are a lot of issues, like now there are a lot of conflict issues in terms of elephant conflict issues. So these elephant conflict issues, especially in North Bengal, in Assam, so especially in where railways passes through. So there are technologies of laying of optical fibers and trying to look at using their, when elephants walk. So somehow, if this signal can be embedded into the signal of the railways. So if this can be communicated, if the elephants are ahead in the railway track, and if somehow this signal can be transferred to the locomotive driver, so this can be the elephant. So the train speed can be controlled, and the elephant mortalities can be reduced. So these are the technologies that are being. WA is also involved with this. We are working with Ministry of Railways and other signal maintenance agencies and optical fiber engineers to look at solutions to minimize conflict. Not only this, there are also other conflict mitigation mechanisms like hanging solar panels for preventing elephants to entering into human habitations or the crop fields. So there are very different technologies that are being used. The UAVs, the unmanned aerial vehicles, are also used for surveying for many areas. So there are a lot of technologies that are being used in terms of various purposes in our field of wildlife conservation and management.
So the last question from Mr. Debasis again. What should be the measures taken for conservation of wildlife resources from the yearly devastated floods of Brahmaputra River?
Brahmaputra is the flow of Brahmaputra is the annual rhythm. It actually is not. It is not at all a negative thing for the Northeast. It brings in more water and sediment, as I said. It shapes the entire landscape. Only thing is our populations have increased and we have settled most of the places, and this flooding happens. Like for example, without flooding, Kaziranga National Park or Tiger Reserve cannot exist. So flooding is a very important mechanism for survival of Kaziranga. The floodwaters from the Brahmaputra, it reaches into Kaziranga, it swells up, and then the waters then recedes back into Brahmaputra. So this brings in a lot of sediments, and then gives a lot of life to the floral wealth of which also, like for example, the one-horned rhinoceros may require long grasses, and then hog deer, smaller ungulate species, may require short grasses. So this kind of balances, the river actually shapes the biological wealth of the landscape. The Dibru-Saikhowa National Park which is found in the confluence of the rivers of Lohit, Dibang, and Siang, is again a very important protected area. So floodwaters coming in shapes the ecological design of these landscapes. It's very important. There are too many questions.
Thank you very much, respected sir, for answering the questions. We are extremely grateful to you for sparing your precious time for delivering the talk. We wish you and your family a happy, healthy, productive, and joyful long life. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, all of you, and I would love to hear the feedback from the participants. If you can share it, it will be nice. And thanks to the organizing committee, and thanks Nazneen, and thanks to Dr. Jamal Khan. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Once again.
So I'll disconnect. Thank you.
I now invite Mr. Intikhab to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Sana. I now propose the vote of thanks for today's webinar. First and foremost, I, on behalf of the organization, wish to place on record our sincere thanks to the Honorable Vice Chancellor, AMU, who very kindly granted his permission to organize the webinar on the occasion of Wildlife Week Celebration 2023. I also wish to place on record our sincere thanks to our respected speakers today, namely Professor P.K.Malik and Professor G.V.Gopi, who very kindly and graciously agreed to spare time out of their busy schedule to deliver the talk. Thank you very much, sir, once again. I also wish to thank the Dean Faculty of Life Sciences and the Chairman, Department of Wildlife Sciences, for their kind permission for organizing the webinar and for gracing the occasion. Thank you very much, sir, once again for your guidance. I also wish to place on record our sincere thanks to staff and respected MICs of the Electricity and Land and Garden Department for their kind cooperation in facilitating the webinar. Thank you very much, sir. Our sincere thanks to all staff members of the Department of Wildlife Sciences for their hard work in organizing the webinar and their kind cooperation for smooth conduct of the webinar. I thank all my classmates for their kind cooperation in organizing the webinar. Thank you to all and God bless all. Thank you.
We have now come to the end of today's webinar. The University Tarana shall play, which will be followed by the national anthem. All are requested to rise and stand when the national anthem is played. We are extremely grateful to all the participants who attended the webinar today. Their certificates shall be sent within a week. Also, I would request you all to open up your videos for a while so that we can take the screenshots which will be shared along with the certificates. Thank you.
विधाता
पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा
द्राविड उत्कल बंगा
विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा
उच्छल जलधि तरंग तव शुभ नाम जाने तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा
जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे
भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
So we are taking the screenshots. Please open up your videos. Don't laugh. Thank you very much, dear all. Dear participants, you all can leave now. Thank you so much.